Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us, taking time out of your Friday night. A very warm welcome to you on behalf of the UK Asian Film Festival. I'm Suzi Mann, and tonight we have the very talented, award-winning photographer and filmmaker, Rehmat Rayatt, joining us, following, of course, the online screening of her film, Toxification, in collaboration with the Harrow Arts Centre. So without further ado, I can see you, Rehmat. Hopefully you can see me. Technology will not let us down tonight. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a really, really busy week for me. I'm actually working on a film edit at the moment, and so I'm not in my usual office. So I feel a bit like I usually have the Toxification banner behind me. So yeah, feeling a bit frazzled, but otherwise well. How are you?
I'm good. And the last time we met in person, I'm still getting used to this. It feels still quite surreal, doesn't it? That ordinarily we'd be sat, next to each other with a cup of tea. But of course, we're having to adapt to new ways of connecting. And thankfully, technology is allowing us to do that. But we last met in person when I got to know more about Toxification at the Botahar event. And of course, you were awarded there. So I think that's what we'll start with, Rehmat. It has been quite the journey from global film festivals, cinema screenings, mainstream media coverage, numerous awards, including Best Documentary at the Ottawa Film Festival, and now streaming globally. Can we just make a big deal about this? Because I must be the last person to find out, and I am a serial binger when it comes to streaming content, especially with us being in lockdown. But I only just found out this week that Toxification is actually available on Amazon Prime. Wow, what a moment, right? That's a milestone in itself.
Yeah, I have to say I did shed a tear when I saw it on there, not gonna lie. Yeah, I mean, this was always the dream to get it onto, one of the two big platforms, Netflix, Amazon Prime. And it took a long, long time to get it there as well. It's been a long journey. But to see it there and to be able to log on to my Amazon Prime and search for Toxification and it actually comes up, I bawled my eyes out. Oh. And wow. Yeah, I mean, it's massive. I get really emotional just talking about this film all the time. Like every interview I do, I'm like, oh, because it's been such a journey for me personally. And I think it's really tough sometimes because we're a really, really small team. And so you're probably not the last person to hear that Toxification is on Amazon Prime, because we don't really have a marketing team or anything like that. It's just me on social media, basically. But yeah, I think for me, I really, really rely on people to spread the word and to support me in that way and to support Toxification in that way. So anyone who's listening to us, please share on your social networks, share, chat to friends, send out WhatsApp messages. It's available to watch on Amazon Prime. If you've got Amazon Prime, it's free. And if you don't have Amazon Prime, it's only 99p to buy it. So yeah, please do spread the word.
And of course, it's available globally as well. Nishani Plus is that another platform that it's available on. So Rehmat, when you started out on this journey back, 7 years ago in 2014, what did you envisage? Did you envisage any of this? Was there an objective? Was there a plan? Or was it kind of, we got the backpack, we got some equipment, you had a goal in mind, and off you went, and on a journey of discovery almost?
Yeah, it was, looking back, it was absolutely bonkers. And I would never dream of doing things in the way that I did now with hindsight. But I think also it wouldn't have been made if it wasn't for the kind of situations that led to it happening. So essentially, myself and my co-director, Leva Questani, we were both young. I mean, we were kind of 3 years out of uni or 4 years out of uni. We had studied together. She had studied film production. I had studied photography, and I'd fallen into filmmaking during my degree. And so we were like, okay, let's make a film together. We've never worked together before, so we'll just stick to like a short 5-minute film and just see how our dynamics work together and what we end up creating. And I still do feel massive like imposter syndrome, because I didn't study a degree in film production, although I ended up doing a few different courses. At that time, I definitely felt this imposter syndrome of, I haven't studied this, so I don't know how good I'm going to be at this thing. So we were both backpacking at the time. She had been backpacking for a number of years, and I was on this 6-month journey around Asia. And so we literally, I mean, you have those big backpacks, so you can't fit a huge amount in there, and I was there for 6 months. So it was literally, I had really, really basic camera equipment. I remember I had this tripod which was so like rickety, like you can't even believe that this film was made on such like really, really basic equipment. And so we went out thinking, let's make this 5-minute film. She had said, what should we make it on? Like, because I had said, let's go to India, let's meet up in India, let's make our paths cross in India. And she had said, well, you're Indian, what should we make this film on? And I had said, well, I've heard about this issue. And that was literally how it started. And and so we started making this 5-minute film. And then each time we spoke to a farmer, their story was so unimaginable that it just was growing and growing. And then, the next time someone would ask us, oh, what are you doing? What film are you making? How long is it going to be? We'd be like, oh yeah, we think it's going to be about 10 minutes long. And then it's like, oh, we think it's going to be 20 minutes. And then I remember getting to 30 minutes. And then the next time someone asked me, I was just like, I don't know.
So we're going to pull out 3 hours, Bollywood timing, But like you said, when you sort of started out, I think, you had a subject matter in mind. And then, of course, when you started with the exploration and you know what, it's been done. I watched it last night, Rehmat, and it really strikes a chord. I think more so for me as well, because I come from a family of farmers. I was 8 years old when I went to the Punjab from my mum's family. And the situation was kind of, my parents were both working, just me and my brother, and they thought it'd be good for me to learn a bit about my culture and heritage. And it's literally been thrown in the deep end. So as an 8-year-old, I'm in Rampur. And all I remember from that time is, flourishing land and blooming crops and just the hard graft that, my nana ji, my mummy, and they weren't all into farming. One of my mum was a doctor and engineer, but that's what they did, from dawn till dusk. And, watching Toxification and seeing how much has changed. What was your sort of perception? So did you have a perception in mind of what you would encounter, what we'd come across, and how different was that from the reality?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that I've got no family in Punjab. And so every time I had traveled to Punjab, like I was lucky to have been a number of times. I'd traveled with my parents, and my brother had studied music in Calcutta. So I'd been to India a number of times, and I'd been to Harmandir Sahib and all of that kind of stuff. But it was as a tourist, it was staying in hotels. So I had the tourist experience, and I was viewing India from the tourist lens. And although I've kind of had a lot of, I've journeyed into my identity for many years. And as a young person, I grew up in Essex, in the kind of, not the Indian part of Essex, the very British part of Essex. And so I had toyed with this idea of identity and what that meant for me for many years before that. And every time I had been to India on these like touristy trips, I had tried really hard to like make a connection and to feel Indian. And the result was that I just didn't, and I was kind of felt like I was trying to force something. And so Toxification for me became a journey to discovering my connection with Punjab and my sort of Punjabi-ness, because that was very much missing. And suddenly here we were in Punjab, literally living in the Pind, in the village, living with farmers in their homes. We kind of traipsed around different farmers' homes, and obviously each of them just kind of said, yeah, stay with us for the night. And so we were staying in all these different farmers' homes and, eating the food from the farms and waking up with cows, like, cows waking us up out of, from the window, and hearing the part, the prayers coming from the Gurudwara, which is in that, there's like a Gurudwara on each kind of piece of land. And so having that experience, I don't really know what I expected. I think I didn't really expect much, because I thought I was making a 5-minute film. But I definitely didn't expect that. And I didn't expect to feel so at home. And I kind of expected to still see it from this tourist lens of, oh, isn't this lovely? Isn't this like, you know, so beautiful? But I actually found myself feeling so at home. And I remember points when, because we would do a lot of our interviews either very early in the morning or at sunset, because otherwise the sun was like way too bright and it was like really unflattering because there was like shadows under people's eyes. And so we were waking up at 4 a.m. to start our interviews at 5:30. And wow. I remember Leva, like every morning she was like, oh, for God's sake, these cows and these prayers. And I was just loving it. I was like, how can you think that? Because this
don't need to set your alarm clock, right? There you go. Nature calling. And so what did you learn from that as well, Rehmat? Because I think I heard you say somewhere that, well, one, it's a foreign country, of course, and it takes some adapting. And then how fluent were you in Punjabi?
Yeah, so this is something I'm really embarrassed about. My Punjabi is not good to nowhere, really. I mean, I understand it. Well, I would say I understand British Punjabi. So I understand the how are you, I'm okay sort of conversation, but I didn't understand the this crop and that crop and these kind of words I had never heard before. So I've just remembered this. Before I went, I actually asked my mum to write down a load of words that I might need. And I remember she wrote things like fussel and like in a little like dictionary format. And so I had this book. But yeah, I mean, my Punjabi was little to nothing, and Leva is Kurdish, so she's got no connection with India. So yeah, I mean, my mum always kind of pokes fun at me for being, two young girls who didn't speak Punjabi turning up in the village trying to make a film about, a topic which is very much rooted in Punjabi culture, which a lot of people already, a lot of people from our culture, from the Punjabi culture, know about these issues already, but we were trying to go deeper than that. And I can't believe that we were able to go that deep, with the kind of tools that we had. But I think it's less about that, and it's more about people and connection. And if you can make a connection with someone, obviously it matters to speak the same language, but there's something more than that in connection, which you can't express that with words.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that sort of deeper connection. I was going to say at this point, Rehmat, just to put you to the test, we'll continue in Punjabi the rest of our chat and see how you got. I'm joking. But see, what really came across, I think, with the farmers sharing their stories, there was that real integrity and honesty and warmth and spirituality. Like you said, you would hear the prayers from the gurdwaras in the morning, and they had that real sense, didn't they, that their trust was in God and to harvest well, for the crops to flourish. And that was really lovely and touching to see, because it took me back to, obviously, my nana and how he spent his life in doing kheti, as they say, and how things have changed over time, how difficult and challenging it is. And then we had I think it was Guru Pratap, I might have got the name wrong, but the youngster who, for perhaps many different reasons, he fell into that sort of vicious circle of drugs. But just having that courage, I think that was really refreshing to see, that he could share his experiences, and there was hope in there as well, despite the turmoil and the crisis. But there was, you captured it so well that we could see that this was somebody who was sharing their story, who'd come out almost the other end, and that can only inspire so many other people. I don't know, Rehmat, has the film been screened in Punjab? Has it been shared with everybody that contributed towards it, and what's been their reaction?
Yeah, so we were really, really lucky that just before COVID made its appearance, so this is February 2020, we were actually in India, and we held a screening of Toxification at the Hermitage Rehab Centre, and Guru Pratap was present, so I got to meet him again. And it was brilliant. I think I was very surprised, because I assumed these people live in Amritsar. These people will have a really deep understanding of the issue, and they're probably going to watch it and think, oh, well, I know all of this. But actually that wasn't the case. There were lots of people who you could see it had really touched them and they were very emotional about it. And there were a lot of, questions trying to find out more about the issues, especially like the kind of agricultural issues. And so I was really surprised by that. And it just shows that there is definitely a need for more screenings in India. And I think also I'm really keen for it to be screened in other parts of India, because, there's almost this divide in India of kind of north south, but even, I mean, there's lots and lots of divides, and there are kind of, whatever you want to call them, whether you want to call them conspiracy theories or whatever it is, about the water being diverted from Punjab to other states. And I think it's really important that other Indians are hearing Punjabi stories. And I think it can be quite difficult to bridge that gap, but film and, creativity and art is one of those things that can bridge those gaps and lead to a deeper understanding of each other's situations and feelings. And so, yeah, that's something that I'm really, really keen to do. I think if we weren't in this situation with COVID, maybe I would have kind of gone out there and been able to do a bit more of that work. But I'm really glad that it's available to watch globally. It's just about now getting the word out to those audiences.
Absolutely. And do you feel like it's also been used as a bit of an educational tool as well? Because I'm sure there's lots of youngsters in that situation where perhaps it's not, their first choice to fall into the farming and follow and continue that legacy. What sort of opportunities did you find that now exist on the back of this project, Rehmat? And I don't know if you will know the answer to this, but in terms of resources, like you said, the rehab centres, in terms of promoting more education, even with the ladies, I think, for young women, in a traditionally patriarchal society, are they now being given that sort of freedom to study and become financially independent to help support the families? Because some of them are having to do that, haven't they, due to their individual circumstances. Do you think there's been a shift?
Yeah, I think it's tough. And I think progress is always a little bit slower than I want it to be. I can be very impatient. But I mean, Harjeet Kaur's story, so she's the one who... she says, I'm not getting married yet because I want to make sure that my family are set. And I think that was a really important thing for us to keep in the film, because there is some progression happening there. You can just see in that one sentence, that something is changing. And so I think it will be slow. But one thing which is really interesting and might pose a challenge is that all of the farmers we spoke to, every single farmer that we spoke to, said, I want to ensure that my children are educated so that they can move out of farming, because we don't want them to do this work anymore. So what's going to happen to the future of Punjab if all of the children of farmers are not interested in working on the farms, or not supported to work on the farm? So for me, I mean, obviously, to make this film and to spend all of these years working on this film, I am totally emotionally invested, and I'm totally interested in supporting Punjab. And it's I find it really difficult because I don't have the answers, and I don't know how we can sort of save Punjab. But what I do know is that information needs to be collected on each bind and what can support each bind, because I think the solution has to be long term, and it has to be tailored to each village, because different villages kind of have different circumstances and different challenges. And so I know that Saving Punjab are currently running a survey called the My Bind survey, and you can find it at savingpunjab.org. And what they're doing is they're collating that information so that they can put together a plan for a model village. So basically testing out the solution on one village, and then if it works, rolling that out to other villages. So if anyone listening has any family in Punjab, or if they know their bind really, really well, you can take this sort of quiz and give that information so that a solution can be tailored. But it's tough, because I often, in these Q&As, I often have people saying, well, what's the solution? And it's really hard. People really want to donate, and I think that's really beautiful. But for me, the solution has to be long term, and I haven't yet seen a solution which, for me, is adequate. And I think you can't just expect a solution to be created overnight. I think it is going to take time. But yeah, I know it's tough to hear that it's not a sort of easy answer.
And I think we can all slowly do our bit towards that. I think, lockdown, if anything, has sort of made us all sort of slow down and think. Of course, we've had the farmer protests going on at the forefront. We've all sort of educated ourselves and finding out, about the agricultural bills, what this actually means for farming. And it's almost like what I can compare it to, I found, Rehmat, is when the virus hit us. And then, we came across movies that perhaps we dismissed at the time, or they didn't quite connect, like Contagion and Outbreak. And then we were like, oh, wow, they've been talking about this virus for quite some time, and they'd even made films on it. And I almost feel the same with Toxification, isn't it? It's almost kind of like, wow, this is something that you made in 2014 and it came to the forefront in 2019. And now there's that connection with the farmer protests, and something that, you highlighted quite some time ago. But I think it's good in a way that the spotlight has come back on Toxification and it's gained some more momentum, and that can only be a great thing, especially for a filmmaker. But how before I get to the next question, in fact, I wanted to touch on something else that in recent years, we've heard some harrowing stories and seen how women are treated as a different class of citizen in India. How safe did you and Leva feel when you were in the Punjab? Because, young women in a foreign country, you've already mentioned that staying with the farmers, which sounds lovely, and the hospitality, I think, was there from the get-go. But did you feel unsafe in any kind of way traveling freely out there as you were doing your research?
Yeah, I think looking back, there were a lot of moments where I think, I can't believe I did that. But I think, what backpacking teaches you is just to trust, because for me and for a lot of backpackers that I know, you kind of end up in these situations and you just have to trust in humankind. And I know that's not always a great solution, but for me, I did feel very divinely guided in this process. But I do remember she had been backpacking since we had graduated from uni. So she had sold all of her stuff, packed up and just left. And so she was much better at just trusting and surrendering and just allowing whatever to happen to us. I remember there was one point where Guru Pratap, we had just met him, and he had said, let me take you to my village. I want you to meet my mum, as they all did. And his village was about an hour and a half away, and he drove us there. And I was sitting in the front, Leva was sitting in the back. She was totally clueless the whole time. I was speaking in broken Punjabi. She didn't really understand what was going on. And I remember he stopped. Oh yeah, he wanted to show us the room where he was doing the drugs. And so he stopped and got out of the car, and I whispered to Leva, like, we're in this guy's car, and he's like, he was a drug addict. And like, what are we doing here? And Leva was like, oh no, it's fine. And I was like, it had just struck me that like, we have no idea where we are and what are we doing? And so yeah, there were moments like that, and I feel really grateful that obviously I was safe. We were both safe and well. And yeah, in hindsight, I'm not sure I would put myself in those positions again. But I'm really glad that I did. And there were also some really magical moments. So we stayed with Darshan Singh on his farm, which is a really remote farm, the organic farm. And we stayed with him for one night, and again it was like completely in the middle of nowhere, and that I was a bit nervous about the whole thing. And I woke up in the morning to him singing kirtan, singing hymns from just outside our room on the sort of like balcony. And I was just like, it's okay, and we are safe, and we are well, and there is
was Darshan who'd moved from the south of France. Have I got that right? It was Darshan Singh, wasn't he? I had a strong connection towards him as well. His passion really sort of came through in the movie as well, which is absolutely lovely. I've got so much more to ask you, Rehmat, but we're going to incorporate some of the questions from our lovely audience. So let's start with Anuj first, who says, having made Toxification, what's been the biggest change that you've witnessed in yourself as a person?
Oh gosh, so many things. I've definitely been on my own journey. I think I've learned a lot about my my steadfastness and my stubbornness, because I think it's been a really challenging process, because I came back and I was 23 years old. I had this film and I was working on it, and many of my family members and many of the people in the industry that I spoke to were like, yeah, you should probably just not bother with that. Or after 3 years they would kind of say, yeah, maybe you should just give up on that, just do something new. And I remember like people that I really respected, who were worked within the industry, would say that to me, and I just didn't listen. And I was so stubborn about the fact that I had to do this thing. So I've learned a lot about trusting in myself, and I've learned a lot about kind of feeling that intuition and going with that intuition, because I always saw Toxification. Like I remember when it was featured in The Guardian. So The Guardian reviewed it a few years ago, and I had dreamed of that moment when we were filming Toxification. I remember filming a field and thinking, oh my God, how amazing would it be if it got into The Guardian? And I remember thinking, how amazing would it be if it won an award, or if it ended up on one of these, online platforms? And those were only dreams, but I've learned that dreams can come true. Like, honestly, it's so cliche, but that's the biggest thing I've learned. And I've learned that I can do this, and I do have the tools, and I do have everything that it takes. And that makes me feel really excited and a bit more confident to make my next film now, which is really exciting.
Wow, so creative visualization definitely works, and you're proof of that. So how has your outlook changed, Rehmat, in terms of the type of content that you want to put out there? Do you feel a more stronger connection towards sharing and promoting social issues and unconventional subject matters, or are you also still hoping to dabble in some sort of commercial content as well?
Yeah, so I've been doing lots of different things since Toxification, which is how I like it. I think documentary making, or the kind of documentaries that I want to make, are really heavy on the heart. So Toxification was emotionally really, really draining, but those are the kind of films that I want to be making. And I've realized about myself that I can't make films like that back to back, and I have to be doing some other things in between. And I've actually been on my own journey of I trained to become a yoga teacher, because I realized how much I needed to be able to hold that safe space for myself. And so I've been on my own journey. I mean, I've worked on commercial shoots as well. A couple of months ago, I worked on a big shoot for Vartika, the hair oil company. So, I do lots of different things. But in terms of my next documentary, that's kind of in my head, it's starting to take shape now. So I'm thinking about another issue in Punjab, which is female infanticide, and it's another really heavy issue, and it's going to be another emotionally challenging or emotionally draining issue, but I think it's going to be also it's just necessary. And I feel a responsibility as a Punjabi filmmaker to be the one to tell these stories, because it's important to me that as a filmmaker, I'm not just pointing the finger, and I'm not just placing blame. Like I hope that everyone who's watched Toxification understood that it was really important for us to hear every side of the story, to allow our audiences to make up their own minds. I never wanted to make a one-sided documentary, and I don't want to in the future. And my focus on making documentaries about Punjabi culture and the challenges and the things that are kind of not so good that light needs to be shed on. It's not about, this is a really difficult, this is a really bad thing, and I want to point the finger. It's about, why is this happening, and can we unpack this a little bit more? And how can we, what choices can we make to alleviate this issue, or to understand this issue a little bit deeper?
On that note, in fact, we've had a question in from Dan. Dan, thank you. Dan says your film was excellent. Congratulations. The stories must have been very hard for the farmers to share. How did you build trust with the farmers?
I think it really helped that we were two young female filmmakers with these like tiny cameras. Well, they weren't tiny, but we had like, you know, we had very little kit and we were a very small crew. I think that was massive, and it's not very often that it's a positive thing to be a female in this world, unfortunately. But yeah, that, you know, when we were filming Toxification, for sure it was, and I noticed at the time that it was a massive thing that we were two young women, and that was probably the biggest factor for why these farmers felt able to share so much. I mean even like, I think everyone can probably notice that in our lives and in our relationships we share differently with men than we share with women, and I've often found that my male friends or male colleagues feel more able to talk to me about feelings than they do like their own brothers or their own male friends. And so that was massive for me, and I feel so grateful to be born a woman basically in this life, and to be able to do this work, and there's not many women that can say that.
Yeah, and I'm sure equally they were grateful that, you know, somebody is giving them a platform for their voices to be heard. And that you know, in the life in the bin, that might have been a little bit daunting at first as well, because you have so many questions going, where's this going, what are you filming, where are you putting this out, kind of thing. But I think, you know, what they went on to share ended up just being really powerful, and that's all kudos to yourself and Leva and the rest of your team. Rehmat, we have another question from Amit. It says, really inspiring documentary. I wish this reaches out to as many people as possible. Well, Amit, you can make that happen on social media. How did you keep yourself motivated to finish the film? I think we touched on that a little bit earlier, didn't we? That you also mentioned, Rehmat, that, you know, some friends and family members were probably saying this is just taking too long, you know, scrap it and do something else. But on that note, how supportive are other people in the industry? Of course, you know, the festivals that you went to, when you're having these conversations about showcasing your art, your project, how receptive were people around you? What was the response that you were getting as a female filmmaker in what we quite often say male dominated industry? I'd like to think that's slowly changing, but are the perceptions changing of people?
Yeah, it's been really mixed. I mean, I obviously have had so many more no's than I've had yeses, because that's how it goes. I think in any, or in most industries, there's a lot of no's and there's a lot of closed doors. So yeah, in terms of keeping myself motivated, so firstly, this is a complete like voluntary project. So everyone of the kind of core team worked on this film in an entirely voluntary capacity. We paid for our flights there and back. We've never taken money from the pot of Toxification, and so that's really important. And I think the most important, the thing that helped me most with the motivation side was just feeling that responsibility and feeling like this was something that I had to do, because if I didn't do it, then some British filmmaker or American filmmaker would come along and make a very different film. So it was important to me that I was amplifying the voices of the farmers, and like ensuring that I made a film which was doing that. So ensuring that there was no narrator, because I don't want to be telling the stories of the farmers for them. I don't want anyone else to be telling their stories. I want them to be telling their stories. And I want my audiences to be connecting with the farmers and not with some narrator who's in between. So yeah, that's the kind of motivation side. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Where's it gone with again? Yeah, no, it was how to keep yourself sort of motivated to finish the film. That was from Amit. I think, just to expand on that just a little bit more, Rehmat. So doing something that is perhaps a little bit unconventional. It seems like you have a lot of support from your immediate family in terms of, being, young out there backpacking, and on the back of that also filming. But what about other people in the community? How do they react to that? Do you get the same level of support and encouragement? Because sometimes I kind of find that, you know, I've made some decisions in my life, and sometimes, you know, society, you know, think that that's not the norm, because they seem to have preconceptions of, you know, how we as women should go about our lives. And I think we see a lot of that in India, don't we, in terms of the pressures that we felt with some of the farmers, that, you know, my daughters are getting older, should be married by now, and so much of that sort of pressure. So for yourself, do you find that that is now changing? Do you think those cultural norms are sort of disappearing, and people are understanding that, you know, there is space out there to, like, for a creative like yourself, and you should be able to pursue your dreams and your passion?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. One thing which always kind of floors me is every in-person screening that we've ever had. So I think we probably had about 10 or 11 of them in total. Every single one my husband was present at, because he supports me. We hadn't met when I filmed Toxification, so we met after I filmed Toxification. Every single screening, people go up to him and say, "Well done for making this film." And I mean, you know, he's really good, and he'll say, I wasn't even part of the team then, I didn't even know her then, go and speak to her and go and congratulate her. And you know, but that's a norm. Every single screening, people have said, "Well done, congratulations, you must have done so much work on this film." And that, I mean,
Why do they automatically assume that he's worked on the film when your name is on the credits quite clearly?
Yeah, and it's funny because I will have just done a Q&A, so but I mean, it's not about me trying to take credit or things like that. It's just, I just find it really interesting that the cultural norm is that a woman can't be making this film, or a woman can't be making this film without the support of a man, or something like that. And it's not like, again, I'm not pointing the finger, because I've been in situations where I have done a similar thing. So I've you know, congratulated a man for a woman's work, and then I thought, why did I do that? So it's not, you know, I'm not pointing the finger. I just find it really interesting to notice that that's an ingrained subconscious
Mindset, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I feel really lucky, because I haven't had comments directly at me kind of saying that, you know, you shouldn't have been doing this, but I know that my parents have, and I know that they don't share that with me. But yeah, I do know that there are people who've said, well, why do you let her do this, why do you let her do that? And I feel really, really grateful that I have parents who wholeheartedly support me, and they kind of take that stick for me. And probably my husband as well. I don't know, I've never spoken to him about it, but I'm sure people say things to him as well. And I feel really grateful to be surrounded by this kind of container of support, which allows me to go and do my thing.
Yeah, and your work is testament to that, hugely inspiring. Just very quickly, I know I've gone over, I've got probably Aman in the background, but we've got Annika who said, if you could do this film again, what would you do differently and why? That's a good question.
Wow, what a great question. Gosh, that's such a tough one. I think watching it back now as a filmmaker, obviously I'm very critical of my own work in ways that I'm not critical of other people's work. But looking back, visually, I would have made a lot of different decisions. And like, I mean, the camera equipment that we use now is so different, and we have these gimbals to keep everything steady now. And I mean, I remember there are some shots of fields, like there's the shot of the burnt field, and it's kind of like a tracking shot. And we didn't have a track. We had a skateboard on a plank of wood, and that's literally how that shot was taken. So I think with hindsight, maybe I would have taken more kit. I probably would have wanted to research a little bit more, but I think that would have changed the end product. I think a lot of decisions that I would make now would have created a film that was very different, and not in a, you know, not necessarily in a positive way. So I think it had to happen that way, and I'm really glad that it happened that way, and I'm really proud of it as it is. And Yeah, I think also, you know, another thing is I might not have actually embarked on this process had I known how difficult it would be. And that thought makes me really sad, because it's obviously it's so necessary, and seeing the end product now, it's like, oh, you know, this is great. It must have been so much fun or whatever, but it's actually been like 6-7 years of working in a voluntary capacity on this project, emailing people like literally from 6 a.m. till 11 p.m, you know, trying to meet people, trying to get people to screen this film. And it's only in the last like 2-3 years that it started to happen. But had someone told me in 2014, if you make this film, it's going to be 6 years of like unpaid hard slogging, I'm not sure I would have done it. And that's like, I mean, it makes me think about why documentaries are not very well funded in the UK. And like, they're so important and they're so powerful. And why are there not, you know, large bodies that will fund films like this? Because it's really unsustainable. And that just, I mean, it's so heartbreaking that there are other filmmakers who are not financially able to do what I've been able to do. I mean, I feel so lucky. Obviously, I've got the support of my family to financially be able to do this, but not everyone has that support. And to think that there are filmmakers who can do what I can do even better and aren't able to do it, that's just, yeah, just an awful thought.
Yeah, well, Toxification in itself is that inspiration, and so we're so glad that you did persevere, Rehmat. And as they say, it always seems impossible until you do it. That's like with anything, isn't it? Sometimes I'll do a basic job and go, God, that seemed really hard, until I actually started doing it. But on that note, Rehmat, I'm so glad to hear that that hasn't stopped you and hasn't affected your creativity. I think through this pandemic, you probably had to sort of adapt your ways of working, especially in lockdown. I'm sure that's been challenging itself. But have you managed to utilize this time? You mentioned another project. What can we expect from you next? And is there going to be a follow-up? Which I think, you know, that might be one of the questions that's floating out there on the back of what's currently happening in India with the farmer protests. Have you thought about a part 2?
Yeah, I think it is important to, like, just for me to find out what's happening now and what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I think either something big is going to change for farming in Punjab to be sustainable again, or you know, there are potentially going to be really dire circumstances, and you know, we don't know what will happen, and I don't want to think of the worst, but I think the next 5 years are really crucial. So yeah, I would love to make a second documentary. I think I'm at a different place in my life where I'm potentially not able to dedicate the time that I was able to dedicate to Toxification. So I think I would go about the process a little bit differently and try and get some funding and things like that and make it sustainable. But that's something, like, I'm so invested in this work, and I want to continue it through this lens of what is the issue and how can I gain a deeper understanding of all of the complexities of it and still hold that, you know, the fact that this situation is centered around the farmers, like it should be centered around the farmers. It's not just about the agricultural bills. Yes, they affect the farmers, and you know, so everything kind of coming back to the farmers. So yeah, I would love to make a part 2, and I don't know how or when, but I'm sure I will make it happen.
And I think it'd be really nice to perhaps, you know, touch on some of the youngsters and how they sort of see the future of farming as well, because lots of them have a sort of foreign country obsession as well, don't they? Because they, you know, of what they see out in the media, and they seem to think that we have it so much easier here, which in actual fact isn't the real reality of the situation. But I suppose, you know, different career paths perhaps that they would choose. I'm going to squeeze in one more question here, because I've often thought about making a documentary. I wouldn't know where to start. So this is a really good question from Amisha, who says, really thought-provoking and resonated with me. What advice will you give to people who want to make their first documentary?
Oh, wow.
You've got 7 years that you can set aside. No, I'm kidding.
I think just do it and make sure it's led by the heart. I mean, this is just my sort of personal advice. But I think if you are leading with your heart and you're going into feelings, then the story will be much more powerful, because as humans we relate to one another and we understand each other's pain and we understand each other's happiness. We understand feelings. So for me, it's about not necessarily tugging on the heartstrings or creating a situation which is not balanced. It's just, for me, about just go about the process from the heart, and you'll do great. It's not about what camera equipment you've got. It's not about how, you know, well read you are or how much you've studied. It's more about how well do you connect with other people. I mean, this is if you're making a social documentary, but that would be my advice. Just go from the heart and make connections. And I think also I have to touch on this other thing, which is that the process of making a documentary is it's kind of like a loaded gun. So it can be really disempowering to have a camera shoved in your face and to be, you know, telling your story, because it's kind of, the energy is a giving energy. So the farmers were giving energy to us and they were giving us so much. And I have a huge responsibility to do the right thing and to ensure that this film the story was told in the right way. But I know that not all filmmakers feel like that. And I know that not all it doesn't cross every filmmaker's mind to think about the subjects and the impact that it will have on them. And so, yeah, I suppose that's one thing that I would do differently. I would ensure that the filmmakers are supported, because I was essentially asking them to relive a traumatic past. And then I left the country, and some of them I haven't been able to visit again. And that, now looking back, doesn't feel supportive to me, because I've done lots of work in mental health and I've done trainings in trauma and all of that kind of thing. Now that model doesn't work for me, and in the future I would potentially go out and ensure that I'm able to support the farmers sort of emotionally in some way. If I'm asking them to relive this trauma or to relive this challenging time, like there has to be some giving back if I'm going to take. So for me, that's how I see it now. And I also know that I don't know if I'm going to be able to get funding for me to make a film and to take a therapist with me. You know, like, I don't know if it's possible to get funding for something like that, but that's something I'm really keen on ensuring.
Wow, thank you for that, Rehmat. Thank you for all your insights. Just before we wrap up, where can we find you on social media? Where can we follow more of your journey? And, you know, the usual handles for us to really, you know, get Toxification, now that it is on a global platform, really, you know, make sure it goes out to an even wider audience, because the response has been absolutely phenomenal. And I'm sure you're overwhelmed, and you know, the labors of your hard work have paid off, albeit it's taken time. So yeah, please do share where we can follow your journey.
Yeah, so you can find Toxification at Toxification Doc, which is DOC, which stands for documentary. You can find me at Rehmat Photo Film. And I'm actually running a mindful photography 6-week online workshop from Monday. So if anyone's interested in learning new ways of using their smartphone or their camera in a more kind of conscious way, they can always join me there. So yeah, Rehmat Photo Film. And in terms of my sort of yoga, spirituality, mindfulness journey, that's Orb Wellbeing, so ORB Wellbeing. So yeah, I'd love to see everyone online, and drop me a DM and we can connect there.
Fabulous. And just before I wrap up, to let you all know that Tongues on Fire's annual UK Asian Film Festival will be taking place from the 26th of May to the 6th of June this year. Details on the full programme will be on the website from early May. That's www.ukaAFF.com. And to follow us, you can go to @ComeToUKAFF on Twitter and @UK Asian Film Festival for Instagram and Facebook. Thank you so much, Rehmat. I hope that we will be able to connect in person very, very soon. But once again, congratulations on the incredible work that you've done with Toxification. Wish you all the best for your future projects and endeavours, and thank you for taking time out. Sorry, it was supposed to be half an hour. I could talk to you forever, but we should wrap up now. Thank you to our wonderful audience. Thank you for all of your questions, and we shall hopefully catch up with some more thought-provoking projects in the near future. So thank you once again, all. Have a wonderful evening and see you soon.
Thank you so much, and thank you to UK Asian Film Festival and Harrow Arts Centre as well for putting on this screening